I am a supervisor and an archivist here, but I am also a bookbinder and a freelance book repair person, and I've been doing this for about 7 years. So probably very similar to all of you, I really like books. I mean, if you don't like books, you're probably at the wrong workshop. And so I stumbled across a YouTube tutorial about 7 years ago that taught me how to make my own books. And all of a sudden the floodgates opened and there was this new craft that I was into. And so I did that for a couple months and decided, you know what, let's take this past YouTube and let's go to some actual training under actual master bookbinders. So I did. I went to Pennsylvania, and I will give information on that bookbindery a little bit later. And I studied under a master bookbinder. I did that for a couple years. I've been to a couple sessions, and then I kind of just started some freelance work. And so it's been really enjoyable. It's definitely a learning process. So I will tell you that whatever you do today, give yourself some room and some grace, because you may not like what your results look like, but you've got to start somewhere. And the purpose of this workshop isn't to make things look beautiful and as if they were never broken, but to make things usable so we can keep them in circulation. All right. So our objectives for today are to understand the importance of preservation. And with that being said, that this is a whole workshop based on preservation, not conservation. Those are two very different things. And while some of the things that you're going to be learning today might overlap with conservation, there is still that difference. Identify common types of damage. I am sure you are all already very familiar with common types of damage, and you probably have wonderful battle stories of damages I can't even imagine. My sister-in-law is a librarian, and I've heard some of the most disturbing stories. So if you have any of those you want to share after, that sounds great. And then, of course, actually perform the basic book repair techniques. So I will be talking you through these, but the bulk of this workshop is going to be not so much PowerPoint, but you actually walking through repairs yourself. So you do have materials in front of you. We will take a look at those in just a couple minutes. Everything that's in front of you except for the scissors and the scalpel are yours to take home. And big thank you to the Delaware Division of Libraries and Jacqueline for setting this all up and letting you guys keep the bone folder and the paper. So that's really awesome. The books are yours too. Don't feel too bad. Those are denied donations. I'm sure you guys kind of all know the denied donation deal. And then, of course, we're going to assess, well, when did we repair the book and when did we just read it? So it matters for a handful of different reasons, and I won't read this to you guys verbatim, but the main reason that book repair matters, especially for librarians, is because if you can extend the life cycle or the lifespan of your book, why not? Most of these repairs that you're going to be doing cost under $1 if you have all of the supplies on hand. You know, it might cost 50 cents, and it could cost you 5 minutes or less of your time. Most of the time that goes into repairing a book is putting it under weights and letting it sit for 24 hours, and we don't really count that towards the repair time. It also helps you if you have any rare book collections. You can apply some of your basic preservation techniques to that. If you do have rare book collections and you're interested in repairing them, let me know, or we can get you signed up for a more advanced class, because that's going to go a little bit beyond the basic to a little bit more intermediate and advanced. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And then, of course, it supports sustainability, and it helps us maintain the integrity of historical and cultural significance. So, with that being said, you guys all have books in front of you. So most of you probably are already very familiar with the anatomy of a book. At this point, if you have a book with a dust jacket, go ahead and take that off. I could be wrong. I've been known to be wrong a time or two, so that's okay. But I don't think you guys worry too terribly much if your dust jackets have damage. If you do, there are things that you can do to fix them. Some of the things that we do today can be used to repair a dust jacket. You can also put mylar sleeves on them for extra protection. But you can take your dust jacket, if you have one, you can put it to the side. And if you haven't noticed, most of you within 5 feet behind you have a blue trash bin behind you. So as we get going, you're going to have lots of bits of tiny pieces of trash. Just turn around, put them in the trash can as you go to kind of give yourself a nice clear workspace. Okay, so you've got your book. Most of this you know. You have your front cover. You have your back cover. You have your spine. You have the head of the book. Top of the book is called the head. The bottom is called the tail. Some of you might have, do you see this decorative piece of thread that's like right up here? It's a headband, and if it happens to be at the tail, it's a tailband. You also have the text block itself, which is just all of the pages in the middle. The pages, in most cases, especially if you have a hard copy book, are going to be done in signatures. Does anybody know what a signature is? Would you like to share?
My understanding of a signature is how they lump a certain number of pages together so that they can be sewn into the spine.
Absolutely. So the way that they did it historically, and they still do it today with machine printing, is they would take a portion of the book and they would print those pages in a certain sequence in folio. Then those would get folded up and you would cut just on the edges that weren't going to be along the spine. And then voila, you have a signature, which has its own set of however many pages depending on how much you fold your folder. Then you put your signatures together. And then your bookbinder or machinery can now do it too, would go ahead and sew your signatures together to make that text block. So you could probably see in most of your books, if you look at your actual text block from the side, if you see those little tiny curves and a little bit of separation, those are your signatures. You can count them out if you really wanted to. Good luck to you if you want to do that. You also have gutters. So a gutter is anywhere where you have space between the tail and the head of your book. And that's going to be important as we do our page tipping. You also have a paste down. The paste down usually is what covers the back side of the cover and connects the cover to the rest of the book, to the text block. So your paste down will usually be attached to a flyleaf. Sometimes you can have multiple flyleaves depending on how they manufacture it, but your flyleaf is usually the next page next to your paste down. You'll have that in the front, they'll have that in the back. So there are a lot more, you could break this down further into different vocabulary for different things, but for basic repair, you don't really need to know much more than this. So let's take a look at what you guys have in front of you. So you guys should all have a beautiful Delaware Public Archives envelope with our old emblem. My apologies. So if you open it up, you are going to have Japanese tissue paper. It's going to look like this guy. He's very fibrous, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Put him to the side. We don't need him yet. Courtesy of Jacqueline and her crew, you have your very own bone folder. And historically, these did used to be made out of bone. Pretty sure Jacqueline got you plastic ones, so you don't have to worry about animals or whales or anything. That's great. And then you have paintbrushes. So those are the materials that were in your envelope. You should also have a pair of scissors. It should be one pair of scissors per table. So if you don't mind sharing, or Maria, you get to be a rock star and you don't have to share. You should also have a scalpel to share. I told the last class we like your fingers just the way they are, so please be careful. I'm not even sure where the first aid kit is, so Megan would have to run. So please do not cut your fingers. Thank you to Kelly and Becca. You guys are on call. And then you also have your PVA glue. It is in this beautiful airtight container, which means that if you have any left over, and you should, because I have this much left over from the first session, you can take it home with you, and you can use that to practice on further repairs. You should also have, at the end of your table, you don't have to grab it right now, this is document repair tape. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to that part. And inside of your book, tucked inside, you should have had this hinging tape. So that is actually where we're going to start. We're going to start with the hinging tape. So let me make sure I didn't miss anything before we move forward. I did. Okay. Common types of damage. I'm sure you guys are all very used to this. The first picture up on the left is actually a Bible from last year that I repaired. It had several small rips in it, which is really easy to get in your lighter material type pages, the things that have like onion skin or tissue paper like Bibles. So I fixed that with some Japanese tissue paper. The second one is actually a poster from one of our collections. As you can see, the upper right hand corner just kind of completely detached itself. If you have anything like that, it could be posters, it could be pages of the book. You can absolutely do that as a basic repair. The third one was kind of my favorite repair when I first started here. Word slowly snuck out to a gentleman named David, who's no longer here, that Brittany likes to dabble in book repair. So do you know what Brittany got every single week for several weeks? Books to repair. It's great. I still have many on my shelves. I'm working my way through them. But this was my favorite because it's the easiest repair. So if you have catalog stickers, sometimes we have reference stickers for genealogy and whatnot. And over time, the adhesive that they use on those labels kind of just dries up. And if you ever have a situation where your labels are drying up and maybe you don't have any more in stock, you can very easily apply some PVA to the back and put it back on your book. So those ones are nice and easy. Then on the bottom left, you kind of have more the environmental or the things that are related to the materials that were used in the binding. So that's actually a picture of red rot. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you probably don't have to worry about too much red rot with your collections. And if you do, it's probably in your rare book collections, and that's a slightly different story. But kin to red rot is also mold. So you guys might experience a little bit of mold. I remember accidentally putting my backpack in a bathtub, and I had a book that was in there, and it was a terrible mess. So I was guilty, and yes, that was a library book, and I'm so sorry. And then the last one is just an example of a cover that's come unhinged. I don't know what people do to their books to make them come unhinged, but I can tell you that's a common problem. So we also have another problem with dirt, and that's probably one of the easiest fixes that you can have. So please do not think ill of me, and if you do, I am going to challenge you because you soon will be destroying your very own book with several witnesses in the room. Thank you, Megan. I grabbed this book, and I actually stepped on it an awful lot, and it's not as dirty as I wanted it to be. But if you have books that are dirty, maybe someone stepped on it and they've got like, I don't know, a shoe print, or if there was a house fire, that's a sadder story. But if there's soot or something on the book, you can pretty easily get that stuff off with these beautiful dirt erasers. Has anyone used these before? Look at you archives people. I love it. These are amazing. Come up and feel it after class. They are not wet, but they have moisture in them that helps get the dirt out. So I'm not sure that we can get a good enough picture with this camera. But all you do is you take your dirt sponge, you start in the middle of your document or your book, and you lightly, scrape's not the right word, but you lightly pull your sponge across the paper. The reason you start in the middle and you go slow is in case it's going to smudge anything, but we've used this on documents from the 1700s, we've used this on books, and I haven't had any issues yet. So, but now that I've said that, one of you are probably going to experiment and email me, so I look forward to that email. But yeah, you just very lightly pull the sponge across the paper, and then you will get some dirt that comes off. So you're probably not going to be able to tell too well by the camera, but now there's like this light gray spot right here. Honestly, I would probably keep using this spot until it's a bit darker. But the great thing about these sponges is when you get a spot that's too dirty and you can't use it anymore, you take your handy dandy scissors and you literally just cut off the dirt and you keep on cruising. So these are very helpful tools. I did learn recently that these should be stored in Ziploc bags or airtight containers because they do dry out over time, and as they dry out, it's really not effective. So if you guys have these, especially the archivist crew, and you don't have Ziploc bags, there are Ziploc bags in the supply closet. Feel free to grab some. You can get them from Gaylord, you can get them from Hollinger, you can get them on Amazon. I don't know if Jacqueline used Demco for a lot of this. I don't know if Demco has it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, they're handy dandy, and sometimes they'll come in like bigger blocks, and you can literally just rip them apart and create smaller blocks to hand out to people. So it's a pretty good tool. I call them dirt sponges. I'm sure they have a more technical name. Do you know of a technical name? There is not a more technical name according to my manager, but I can email you links if you like.
I can just Google archival sponge on my Gaylord.
Sure. You do have to be careful because there's the older style ones of these.
Okay.
Yes. Captain. That sounds good. But those are the comment types. And again, I'm actually really quite interested. If you guys have any weird random stories, I would love to hear them afterwards. So I should have brought trophies and we could have had a competition. It would have been great. I like it. We'll do that next time. Okay, so the first thing we are going to focus on is hinging. So I'm going to take this PowerPoint. You should have the PowerPoints in front of you. And I'm actually going to switch to the camera so you can kind of see more of what I'm doing versus the PowerPoint. So if you wanted to follow along, you can on your PowerPoint. Thank you. Okay, so you should have inside your book the hinging tape. So the hinging tape that you have here is from Demco. It's a little bit different than what we would use in the archives. And you'll kind of notice when you peel it, don't peel it yet, that it's kind of a stiff paper. And so this will absolutely work for your library collections. I encourage you to use it. It's going to keep your books in circulation. But if you want to extend that life a little bit further, or if you're working on, great grandma's favorite book as a present to restore it and give it back to her, I would actually recommend that you use the linen hinging tape, because it's got a lot more flexibility and it's going to go a little bit further. I do not think Demco does the linen hinging tape, so if you are confined to a vendor list, I apologize. If you have freedom and can go elsewhere, I will celebrate with you. Okay, so most of the times when you have hinging issues, it's usually on the back or the front cover. I know I've seen some creative ones lately where it's completely unhinged in the middle of the book. So I think 1 or 2 books out of the 50 that we prepared did have hinging issues in the middle. So if you want to kind of flip through and see if you are one of them, go for it. The odds are in your favor that you're not. Okay. All right, well, you are about to damage your book. So like I told the last group, I know, it's funny. We did a training session with these guys yesterday, and I won't tell you which one of the 4, but one of them looked like they were in near tears. She's giving herself away right now. Looked like they were in near tears, damaging the book, and I felt so bad, but also I've been doing this for 7 years, so I can relate, but 7 years ago, I could relate now. It's just kind of, yeah, whatever. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and cut up your books. You're going to take the scalpel. You'll have to take turns. And since the most common area that you come unhinged is right at that cover, right in this gutter, that's where you are going to unhinge yourself. So you can just use your scalpel. Please be careful. We like your fingers. I really don't want Kelly and Becca to have to get the first aid kits. And if at any point you want help, just raise your hand and one of these lovely 4 ladies will come help you. You are going to cut it so that you are going to cut it. You see how that one in the bottom right is completely undone? Like the cover is still intact, it's just not attached to the text block? Yeah. You're going to cut it like that. I'm hitting weird buttons.
Yeah, you'll have to really dig in there.
And it's possible that you might create more issues for yourself as you do this, and that's fine, because it just means you're going to learn a little bit more.
We've lost 2. We really worked on 2 scalpels. Really? Maybe lost.
I think people accidentally took them with them, would be my guess.
Oh, it's like a pen.
So you don't have to completely sever it. You can kind of see how this is just partially. That's fine, because that's actually probably a little bit more accurate to what you'll get. But if you want to, be super committed, keep going. Okay, so if you created more work for yourself, congratulations. It just means you're going to learn a little bit more. But you should generally look like this now. Do you see the kind of rough edges that I have going along here? You might have those too, and if you do, you will want to take either your scalpel, or if you have one back at your normal where you live or where you work, if you have a book knife, these are amazing. They're a little bit more expensive, a little bit more deadly. That's why we didn't prepare them for you. I'm so sorry. But you can just lightly scrape at that edge to kind of smooth it out. You want it nice and smooth before you apply that tape. The other thing about book repair, it's kind of, you know how doctors all have their own opinions or mechanics all have their own opinions? Bookbinders also all have their own opinions. And so there's usually a couple different ways to skin the cat, and that is A-okay. Not that you should actually be skinning cats. All right, so when you are satisfied with your edge and it doesn't feel too rough, you can do it on both sides. Then you are going to take the hinging tape that was inside your book, and you're going to measure. So you are going to want to put your hinging tape down at the bottom of your text block and run it up to the top. And you can either fold it to give yourself a nice line, or if you brought a pencil, you can do that. And then you will use your scissors to go ahead and cut it down to size. For this part, it's better to cut it ever so tiny short than to have it long. So if you check after you cut and it's a little long, just give it another little trim at the edge. And these are practice books. They don't have to be perfect. So if you get back to where you're going and you want to continue practicing on the same book, that's actually really great because then you can see your progression over time. All right. The other thing that I would do with this particular tape is this is awful wide. We don't need it to be this wide. This could actually do 2 books of this size. So I'm going to use this paper cutter. And if you guys want to use the paper cutter too, Megan or somebody can walk it around. But I'm just going to cut it in half long ways, so I have resources for a second book. Next.
Totally can.
The other thing about these tapes is you can get them in different colors. So if you want to kind of color match something, you can. All right, so then once you have it cut down, the next part is putting your book back together as if it was never cut, and then grow a third arm, because now while you're holding that in place, you have to take the back off of your tape and get it nice and even, half and half, or half on the cover, half on that flyleaf, and press it down. So if this can be a 2-person job, if you want someone to help you hold or put tape in place, just raise your hand and one of these lovely ladies will come by. When you get it laid down, you can use your finger to smooth it out. You can also get your bone folder to apply pressure into that groove to make sure you have it nicely adhered. If you had the best of intentions and your tape went over the edge, go ahead and use scissors or a scalpel to trim that back. This is a great time to think about how anytime you do a repair, you're adding volume to the book. So it may not shut quite the same way when you're done, and that's just because anytime you're fixing a tear or adding tape, you're adding just that little bit of extra volume, which is going to change things. If you're still working on the hinging, that's fine. But we are now going to flip to a page in the book, whatever page you want, with one exception. And this is easier to find if you have an older book. So flip to any page you want unless it's the middle of a signature. So you'll know if it's the middle of a signature because you will see thread. It's kind of hard to see here, so I can just walk around. But if you flip to a page and you see the thread of the binding, keep clipping until you have a gutter that does not have that thread. And then you will very lovingly rip that page from the book. Yeah, I would try to have a little control with it so you have a clean rip because that'll make your life a little bit easier. If you whatever page you want, so long as it's not that. Cool. Cool beans. You guys are a little bit more okay with destruction than the last group, so.
Keep going in, you have to do that.
Yeah. All right. So we are about to get messy. If you have your page, the next thing you're going to do is grab one of these long sheets of wax paper, and you're going to prep the gutter. So now you have this gutter with the torn page. Underneath, if you have any fragments that we're going to puzzle back together, slip this underneath of that. This is going to protect the rest of your text block so it doesn't get glue, unintentional glue on it. It also does a really good job of absorbing the excess moisture from the PVA glue. So in a perfect world, the wax paper will be crinkled from the moisture and your book will not. So once you have that placed, and if you get back home, I know we didn't give these to you, I'm sorry, scalpels? Yes, no, spatulas. I've had a heck of a time with scalpels and spatulas lately. I know what they are, but my mouth and my mind aren't quite connecting. You can use them to push them down in the gutter, and that is helpful. So you are going to take your PVA glue, and you are going to apply a very thin line of PVA glue to your tear. Embrace your tear. So whereas with the hinging we cleaned things up, we're not cleaning things up this time because you want to be able to connect those puzzle pieces back together. As you have that thin line on, then it's time to match up your puzzle. So very slowly, very carefully, and trying to make sure you have your tail and your head square. You're going to slide this into place to match the puzzle piece that was left behind. Oh, don't pull the Brittany. Make sure you put it in the right way, not upside down.
Oh, never mind. Thank you.
There are many bookbinders who actually prefer for this particular repair to use a micro spatula instead of a paintbrush for applying. Yeah.
Glue are we using?
This is called PVA glue. So PVA glue is kind of like your fail-safe go-to option for book repair. It is acid-free. It's reversible with mineral spirits. It's all around a pretty good glue. Historically, though, we usually prefer some sort of wheat paste, but what we now know is wheat paste is better for your stiff repairs, like rips and tears, not things like what we're doing right now. So if you need a flexible repair, you want to use PVA. If you have a repair like that rip or tear, I would recommend making some wheat paste. And you do that with water and wheat. And if you can boil water and if you can stir flour, you can make it pretty easy. So you are going to want to use your finger kind of like you would for a caulk gun. And you're going to want to just run your finger along that gutter to make sure you're nice and secure. This is also a good time to kind of assess your puzzle pieces. Are they matching up? If they're not matching up, this is a good time to add that little bit of extra PVA glue to make them match. So this is the repair where you're going to notice this the most. But like we said earlier, any repair is going to add volume to your book. And you're going to notice it here because now your paper is going to extend past the rest of the text block just a little bit. But if that drives you insane, you can actually use sandpaper to sand it down to the rest of the size. But if you have a book that has like a beautiful illustration on the sides, you're probably going to be sanding that off too. But you might not have those kinds of books in circulation, so you might be safe. When you are satisfied with your glue and that your puzzle pieces match, then you can go ahead and tuck another piece of wax paper over top of that in the gutter. And then in a perfect world, you would close your book, you would put weights on it, and you can use whatever kind of weights you have available. You could use other books. You could be so fancy, so high class, and so sophisticated to find random brackets from facilities rooms, and you can use that. We actually have a shelf full of nothing but brackets, and we use them, and they work great. If you have snakes at your library, you can use those. If you have weights, you can use those. You're going to want to weight it for 24 hours, and then the next day you can come in, you can remove the wax paper. You'll see the warping of the wax paper, and it should be good to go. Because I don't want to ask you guys to come back 4 days in a row, though, we are going to pretend like we didn't just do what we just did and move on with another repair. So, to kind of maintain what you've got going on, flip to a different page in your book that allows this tip in to just kind of rest while we do what we're about to do. So mine is towards the end of my book, so I'm going to do the next step in the beginning of my book. Okay, before we start this, I am actually going to show you guys. There are 3 types of tear repair that you can do. And as you do these, if you brought a pencil, feel free to write in your book. I know it's terrible, write it in your book. To let yourself future you know which was which. So if you look at it tomorrow, in future you was like, I really don't remember if this was PVA, glue, tape, or Japanese tissue paper. You'll be good to go. So here's one that I did a couple months ago with another staff and you can see that this is the transparent mending tissue, which makes a very big difference versus the document tape we're going to use. We also have PVA glue in the middle, we have Japanese tissue paper on the end. But the good thing about having books that you continually come back to is that you can reference them when things leave your brain, or if you want to say, hey, no, I don't remember which one of these looks the best. So that transparent mending tissue for what we're about to do is fantastic if your rip extends into the text, because you can still see through it. It's not perfectly transparent, but enough for people to be able to see. So if you have rips that extend into the text of your book, I'm going to recommend that if the tape is the way you want to go, that that's the tape that you use. The tape that you guys have today is not transparent. It'll work perfectly fine so long as your rips don't go into your text. If it does, it's kind of up to you whether or not you want to use it. Yeah, this was their repair tape. This one's just PVA, so not much Japanese tissue paper. So, like I said earlier, the hinge tape, and especially the Japanese tissue paper, comes in multiple different colors. This tissue paper is from Talus. They will actually send you a sample book with all the different colors that it comes into. So, it's not super important for the purposes of the library, just getting something back into circulation. We don't really care if the colors match. But again, if you have a book at home, or if you're working in your book collection and you have something that's very sentimental to you, and you don't want it to stick out like a sore thumb, that is always an option. So, I will actually send that around if you guys want to look at the tissue tables from Talus. Okay, so flip to a page in your book. Any page, it can be a page that you don't like. It could just be a random page. You just make sure that your tipping is below you, and that might mean flipping your book to the other side. You're working from that side. So once you find the page, take a look at the tape that's on the outside of your table. And I am saying this because you can tear however you want to, but try to control your tear so that this one piece of tape will work. Just to, conserve supplies a little bit. So go ahead and find whatever page you want and do a tear in your book. Okay, so once you have your tear, you are going to want to look at those fibers. Kind of like the Japanese tissue paper, all paper has fibers. When you repair a page, no matter how you repair it, you want to look at those fibers and take into consideration how they should sit, because you kind of want them to flush back up the way they were before they were ripped. So that's one thing to take into consideration. The other thing to take into consideration is that and 9 times out of 10, you're only repairing one side of the page. So it's your decision which side you repair, but one of the things you should take into consideration is, does this side have text or illustration that will be obscured if I repair it? Or is it blank and open and wild and carefree? So you can analyze that now in your books and figure out which side you want to apply your repairs to. I'm just going to apply mine to this side, so you're going to take the tape. And the other thing about the document repair tape or the transparent mending tissue that is kind of advantageous to what we're going to be using today is that it has a backer, so it's not just open tape. It's not just open tape. You can sit it down like you did that hinging tape and not worry about, accidentally picking the paper up and having issues. So take your tape, kind of line it up next to your tear to get a good idea of how you're going to cut your tape. You want to cut it as small as possible, but just wide enough to have coverage on both sides of your tear. And you've got, depending on how creative you are with your tears, you should have plenty of tape if your first cut's not great. You can cut it longer than the tear, that's fine, because you don't want to flip it and wrap it around. So once you apply it to your tear, if you have excess, just use a scalpel or a pair of scissors to cut that excess. So you can grab your bone folder and you can go ahead and smooth that tape down once you have it down. Make sure the adhesive's nice and on there. I have a little bit hanging over the side. You can kind of see it here. So I'm going to use scissors to cut it. For me, this is the scariest part because I have a tendency of hugging that page a little too much, and then I accidentally take some of the page with me. But like I said, this is a practicing thing, so just practice. Scalpel or scissors, you just want to cut the excess. All right. So, does everybody feel okay with this one? Because I didn't want to make myself a liar, I took a little bit with me. All right, so if you're feeling good with that one, we'll move on to the next one. So either along the top or the side of the same page, so it'll be easy reference for you later. Go ahead and make another rip. This rip you can be as big and creative as you want to because we're just using PVA glue. So here's my rip. For this one, you should have one last strip of wax paper. You are going to want to cut a small rectangle out, but big enough for your tear. You are going to want to put a rectangle or square, however you cut it, circle, heart, whatever fits your fancy, and you're going to want to put that under your tear to protect the rest of the text block from the PVA. Make sure your fibers are all lined up. You're going to want to go ahead and pre-cut one more piece to put on top when we're done. And then when you're ready, go ahead and dip your paintbrushes into your PVA. Lift your tear up just so you can see it, and apply that PVA to the fibers in the tear. Once you have it to the fibers, go ahead and put it down. Grab that other sheet of wax paper, stick it over top. Just like we have with everything so far, grab that bone folder and smooth it out. Again, in a perfect world, you're only going to do one wet repair. So wheat paste or PVA glue per 24 hours. You want to give it enough time to dry before you move on to something else. Now, if all your repairs were on the same page, go for it. Do them all on the same day. But generally speaking, you want to let things dry before you move on to something else in the book. We do not have that luxury today, so if you have a cell phone or any kind of device that you could put on it as a temporary weight, feel free to do that. Excuse me. And then you are ready to do your third tear. Before you do your third tear, find your Japanese tissue paper. Because again, you kind of have to keep in mind the size of the resource you have to fix. In the real world, you don't have that luxury, but that's okay. So go ahead and make a tear, and this will be your final repair for the day. I feel like we're flying. Are we flying? We're flying. Okay. To mine up here. And the thing with the Japanese tissue paper, and you might not be able to see it on the screen, but when you look at it in front of you, is you have a lot of fibers all around that. And that is so good. That's what we want. It's the fibers that are going to add the extra structural strength and integrity to your repair. So when you're all done and you go home and you look at your repairs, you might think that PVA glue fix is the most appealing to the eye, and that could absolutely be true, but it's also not the strongest. Your strongest is going to be the one that has the Japanese tissue paper. So depending on how sophisticated your tear is going to kind of depend on which way you want to go. So we never, ever, ever use scissors on Japanese tissue paper, at least not when you're fitting your repairs. So if you're not a very good tearer, don't worry, we have extra. You shouldn't have to use your whole thing, but you are going to put your Japanese tissue paper next to your tear and tear a similar shape to be your bandage over top, just like you did with the document repair tape. You don't want it to be too wide. You want it to be nice and thin. And this time you absolutely have to tear a little bit longer than your tear, because ultimately you need a place to put 2 of your fingers and keep 2 of your fingers for this entire repair. So go ahead and rip it if you haven't already. For this repair, I would really recommend using wheat paste. I didn't prepare any wheat paste, and PVA will work just fine. Conservationists tend to prefer wheat paste. It's easier to reverse than PVA glue. But again, if this is just for a library collection, PVA glue is fine for everything that you do, and it's a lot easier. But if you want recipes for wheat paste, let me know and I will email you. So you can kind of see how I'm pulling at the sides to get those fibers really spanned out. Go ahead and do that. The more little fiber arms you have sticking out, the better your repair is going to be. And then you can put that guy down, because you are going to need to pre-cut 3 pieces of wax paper. So you need the rectangle to go under the tear. You need the rectangle for when you're all done with the repair. And then you need a third one to kind of serve as a canvas. So here's my canvas. Wax paper is really not going to like tape, but if you want to try and keep it down a little bit so it's not buckling up on you, feel free. And from this point forward, you are going to hold the edge of your Japanese tissue paper, and you are not going to let it go. And the reason you're going to do this is because if you think about normal tissue paper, what happens if you get it wet? It like wads up, it can't work with it, you gotta throw it out, you gotta use something else. It's the same principle with Japanese tissue paper. So if you let go of this after it gets wet, God bless you and good luck trying to use that piece. You'll probably have to rip up a new one. So hold your corner, put it over your little canvas piece, grab your paintbrush, and before you start painting, you need to keep in mind that you're not Bob Ross, so don't go back and forth. You're going to go in one direction from your thumb to the tail of your tissue paper, because if you do go back and forth, you're going to accidentally wad up your tissue paper, and you're going to have to start over. So go ahead and start saturating your tissue paper with your PVA glue, or if you're doing this in the future, wheat paste. You do want to saturate both sides, so once you're satisfied with it on the one side, very carefully pick it up, flip it over, keep that pinch hold, and put some PVA on the back side. Okay, when you're satisfied, slowly peel it up. Make sure you've got your clean wax paper underneath your tear. You are now one-handed, so if you haven't already aligned your fibers and you need help, raise your hand and one of the ladies will come by. Align those fibers. Know whether you're applying it to the back or the front. You very carefully lay your Japanese tissue paper over top of your tear, and you can use your finger to kind of help it stay where it needs to stay. Then you can take your other wax paper, you can stick it right on top, and just like you have with everything else so far, you can go ahead and smooth it out. Yes, please. Yeah. And if you want to, when you're smoothing out with your bone folder, you can go from the middle out to make sure that those little edges of the fibers are really stretching out and doing their job. When you are done with that, you will close up your book and you will find weights. And if you guys want to, we have bookbinders thread that the ladies can come around and get you guys hooked up with. They'll wrap it like a Christmas present. That's not a weight, but it will keep it mostly in place until you get to wherever it is that you're going today. That way, if it shifts and whatnot, it will reduce the shifting. So, let's see. Okay, so when to weed and when to repair. We've kind of touched on some of this already. I told the last class, if you're missing a page, it's probably a decent idea to weed unless you want to kind of play with copyright issues and find that blank page somewhere and either print it or get it on acid-free paper somehow, cut it down to size, and then you can just tip it in. And that might be the way to go if it's, a personal book. But I haven't really investigated the copyright on that, so if you want to and you find an answer, please email me. That would be great. Water damage usually leads to mold depending on how quickly you can get to the book. I don't know if you've ever used straws. We have buckets and buckets and buckets of straws here. They're so good for mitigating wet books and documents. But you can't always mitigate the entire threat of that. So if you have a book that's moldy, it's probably time to consider replacing it with another copy if a copy is available. If you have like a rare book collection and you have mold in your rare book collection, you clearly don't want to get rid of that book. They do make special vacuums that you can use to vacuum up those kinds of things after you inactivate the mold. So feel free to ask me any questions on that if you want. There's also resources on the internet for that. But as you deal with those types of things, you are now borderline conservation. So be very careful. And then, of course, if you have redundant copies, so we have, our collection policy has it so that we have up to 2 copies of any given title in our research room holdings. Despite that policy, we do have some books that have, 6 copies or more. And that's not ideal, but it's great for if a book gets damaged. Because guess what? I can just read the book that's damaged and take one of the 6 that are in the back and put it out into circulation. So that's always a great option. And then, of course, if the repair costs more than a new copy of the book, you should probably just buy a new copy of the book. Also, your administrative team, they have a pretty big say in this. So make sure you talk to them and see what they're comfortable with. As you practice this more, feel free to do it in the same book, other books. You'll gain confidence and you'll get better. And as you gain this confidence and you get better, that would increase the number of things that you can do quickly and with confidence and the things you can do. So when to repair, if it's a simple fix. So we did pretty simple fixes today. We hinged a cover, we tipped in a page, we did some basic tear repair. So if it's anything like that, I feel fairly confident that you guys are all very well equipped to go ahead and tackle those things down because they don't have to be beautiful. You guys aren't conservationists. You're just repairing the book to make sure that it can go back in circulation and be loved on and read. And you can do that now. If the book has any kind of sentimental or intrinsic value, you're probably going to want to repair that as opposed to buying a new one. And a lot of the books we have here at the archives are just out of print. So if we want to keep that, our only option is to repair that. And then that ties into the rarity of the book. So I think we're almost there. There are 2 resources here in case you guys have any questions or want any kind of further training. Where I studied my bookbinding at is at the historic Sugartown Bookbindery. It's in Malvern, Pennsylvania. From me, it's only about an hour and a half. It's a beautiful historic location, so feel free to check that out. It is a very small class, so they'll have a maximum of 4 or 5 students per class, which helps with the hands-on learning. He also does virtual classes, which are hard, but beneficial if you can't travel. And then you also have Save Your Books. Some of you might be familiar with Save Your Books. It's run by a wonderful woman who has a lot of free resources There are some resources that you have to pay for, but she has a very unique way of breaking things down and making them very understandable.